You're confined only by the walls you build yourself. Welcome everyone to the Core Connections podcast. I am your creator and host, Erica Zeal, where we talk all things health and wellness. And in today's episode, I'm super excited. I have Solange Ross here with me to discuss. We are going to talk about pelvic floor, but we are also going to talk a lot more. We're going to talk about fascia and the body and movement and motherhood and all sorts of awesome fun things. So Solange Ross is a women's health physical therapist trained in evaluation of the pelvic floor muscles. And I'm going to ask her all about how she got started in this. Solange works with women prenatally to prepare for birth, postpartum to heal, and in all stages of life to understand how the pelvic floor fits into movement and exercise. Solange uses a full body approach to treatment, looking at breathing, movement, posture, physical demands on the body, and how areas of the body interact with one another. She bridges the importance of daily function and activities in her treatment sessions and empowers women to be active participants in their healing. Okay, so you're going to be sure you want to listen to our entire podcast today. Anything we talk about, I will post them up on the website at coreconnectionspodcast.com. The information provided in the Core Connections podcast is intended to educate and inform the general public and should not be used as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views and beliefs of the guests of the Core Connections podcast are solely theirs and are in no way a representation of Erica Zeal or affiliates. Okay, let's jump right into our core talk today. So, welcome, Solange. I'm so excited you're here. And Solange and I swear we could just talk for like days and days about core and movement and all of that. So I'm super excited for her to share with everyone. So welcome, Solange.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's always great to chat with you.
So I have to ask, how does one, right, okay, I look at my journey and I'm like, the word pelvic floor comes up a lot. And now for those that might be male listening to this, some of this can apply to you as well. I'm going to put that out there because it comes up, right? The whole pelvic floor. And then, you know, and it's interesting because so many women don't even really understand about the pelvic floor. So like, I feel like you and I really make it applicable. So don't get freaked out by that word by any means. But, you know, for me, I feel like it comes up daily in conversation. I say it like it's your glute. And sometimes people look at me like, you said what? But Solange, how did you start out like in the whole women's health, really at one point kind of specializing, you know, with more of the pelvic floor training as a physical therapist? Like I know you do so much more now, but how did that initially start?
Yeah, so going back to the very, very beginning, I loved running. In my early 20s, I started teaching group fitness. I was obsessed with step aerobics and high impact. I taught slide, and I found myself having a few overuse injuries, and I ended up in physical therapy. And after having those injuries, I was like, I really want to understand the body more. So I decided that I was going to go back to PT school. And my physical therapist at the time was like, I could really see you being in this profession. So that kind of brought me into the PT world. And actually, through PT school, what we learned about women's health was practically nothing. I think we had one class going back, and I think that was on the assessment of the abdominals for diastasis recti, but there was no mention of pelvic floor and how it related to the core and the abdominals. So really what brought me into women's health was I happened to one of my classmates from physical therapy school. She exposed me to the field, and I was a new graduate, and I went to work for her practice, and she really turned me on to this field. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, and I wished that this was the information that I had had in the years prior, teaching exercise and in my personal journey. And
right.
So that's how
I have a comment on that, or kind of like along with what you're saying is, why is a lot of this stuff that you and I both understand and teach, and you obviously have the, physical therapy degree behind you as well, that why is this stuff not taught in schooling? Because I know, and I asked you once a long while back, and I keep so many years, people are like, Erica, why don't you go be a physical therapist? Like, you'd be an amazing physical therapist. But for me, like, a lot of what I've added and morphs, kind of like you, it's like almost that self-discovery. You like kind of stumble on something, you're like, oh, I want to find out more. So you learn from others and you kind of do your own, morphine for your education. Obviously, which allows you to be even more like in the forefront with like research and stuff is saying, because like you look at what's still being taught at a college level or in the medical world, and so much of what you and I discover through what we can teach through movement and breath and posture and all this stuff, right? It's life changing.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that when you're in that schooling world, you're the focus is on absorbing all this information. You've got to know the origin and the insertion and the innervation of this muscle, and you're being overloaded with all this, and then you have to spit this out on exams. But what about trying to feel this in your body and experience this? Let's not just look at it and have the picture. Let's just take that now and feel it, see what our movement is like, notice how our body has been moving, what's missing. I wish that would have been more in the school training, but it's so focused on just all those details, which
the anatomy.
The anatomy. And at the end, it's like, let me just notice how I'm moving. Let me feel how I'm moving. And is that movement what I want? Like, what are all those details what in the end is that anatomy actually doing for me if I can't feel it at all?
Well, right, exactly. And that's where I talk about, and I say like, feeling the connections through your body, and that includes fascia, which I know is something that you're really, really big on as well. So I know more recently, because I see all your stuff on Instagram, so you guys have to follow her on Instagram. What is your Instagram, by the way? Is it just your name?
I think you could search me on my name, but it's at Complete Core NYC.
Okay, that's right. So Solange teaches in New York City. So if you're around there, she's definitely one to connect with. So she posts different things on her Instagram, and I always love it because she's holding like a pelvis or something. And I'm like, it's on my to-do list. I want a pelvis, and I actually want a whole skeleton so I can like...
And if you came to my apartment and looked in my closet, you would see that I have arranged a whole disarticulated skeleton, which is awesome.
Oh, I love it.
I'm going to get a full one, because I realize now I need the bones separate, but then I also need the whole skeleton. So that's in the works too, for me to get that. But speaking of bones, and back to my training as a PT, I never held the bones, looked at the bones, looked at my body, moved my body. And in that sense, in school, like, I was always trying to memorize the details instead of like, okay, there's this pelvis here are those bones. Let me feel that. Let me feel these movements. Where are the muscles exactly here? What's the function? Right. I never looked in that in depth like that. And
I mean, because I have, my background, obviously I don't have as much traditional and formal schooling, but even when I was in college, we took a whole year of, the anatomy and all of that, and you learn the pieces. You learn all the individual pieces, but it's never really talked about or taught, and I don't think it's still even taught. Like, how does this all go together? And that's one of the biggest things that I love what you do too, is like you teach the individual, but it's like, well, how does it all go together? What are you feeling like you're talking about?
Yeah. And just, it's like we can be working on the pelvis, but we're going to look at the head and neck. We're going to look at the feet. We're going to look at everything in between. And it's all going to come into the picture. We can't just take each part of the body in isolation. So that's huge.
So what is the one, like, what's the biggest issue that you see when a client first comes to you? Like, what's the number one thing? Is it like back pain, or is for you working with the pre-postnatal a little bit more, and women in general? This applies to women of all ages. Let me just say that. And even prior to ever having babies, with the pelvic floor, like, is that something that you see, or does that come up later in conversation? Like, do they come to you for something else and then that comes up?
They come to me. It's mainly like the focus, like something with the abdominal area. They don't like the way that looks, or there's some sort of pain. And then as I start to question and go into a history, that's where I start to probe about the pelvic floor, and I start to probe about bowel and bladder habits, function, and going back into what happened in the birth and delivery, and are you having any symptoms, any pelvic floor symptoms? And that's where it starts to come out. And where if I didn't go into my questioning and I just looked at like, they would just be fine if I looked at the abdominals and didn't go there, because in their mind, that's what's bothering them the most. I want to get back to the exercise that I was doing before pregnancy or during my pregnancy. How can I get there? I want, like, that's where I need to go. And so I sort of start in my line of questioning to get them to see that, we have to look at how the abdominal relates to the pelvic floor, relates to the back. And then besides that, how does this all work in a system when we breathe? And then what are we doing? I know you want to get into exercise, and we're going to get there, but we have to begin with how your body is moving in the day-to-day. So what's going on when you're holding your baby, bottle feeding, breastfeeding, getting up and down? There's so much movement that moms are doing that is completely discounted. And if I give, 5 exercises, 10 exercises, there's no way that would compete with the physicality of being a mom for those 23 other hours during the day. They come with looking for the abs, but I kind of uncover, I put it into perspective that we have to look at a system, and it's not only about the abs, it's about daily function and how we're using our body in daily function.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because exactly. And it's hard, and I get it. Like, I look back and, I used to, prior to kids, like, work out really hard. Actually, I look back and I worked out too hard and too much. And sometimes it's really hard to get out of that mindset. Like, we have to work out so hard to see the benefits. Or if you're trying to, like, lose weight, you think more exercise. It's not a calorie in, calorie out. It's so much more. Yes, nutrition plays a big role. And we're not going to really talk too much about nutrition today. We're going to talk about the movement and all of that. But there's so much we can do to get our body to move and function better. And the pelvic floor needs to come up in conversation as Solange. I know, obviously, that's what you talk about. So for so many, and this is what I really want to get across, is this awareness. Like, you might realize that, okay, you have diastasis, or you've got back pain or neck pain or whatever it might be, or maybe you experience incontinence. I find all the time, and I'm definitely curious to see if you get this all the time too, is so many women eventually come out to me and say, like, oh yeah, like, I just thought that incontinence during a workout, because I'm trying to get my body back after baby, was just like normal, because that's what every other mom tells me, is, oh, it's just normal. And while it might be like normal, it's not okay, and we can do something about it. That's like, that is the most important thing.
And also, I think about that, and I get that too, that it's only a little bit, like a few drops or whatever, that whether it's a little or a lot, it's a big deal, and it's something that we shouldn't be glossing over. And though it's common, it's not normal, and it's not in the healthy way that the body is designed to function. I mean, it's really just interesting. I think maybe this goes back to the whole postpartum mindset of just getting back and wanting to be doing what we were doing beforehand so quickly, and not allowing the time for our body to heal and taking the right steps to build a good foundation And going back beyond that, that perhaps in our prenatal life, maybe we didn't have as strong a foundation as we thought. We maybe didn't have the best postural habits. We didn't have the connection to the pelvic floor, the connection to the abs as good as we could have. So now this is kind of a really beautiful time to meet your body, which for some may be for the first time, and really learn how these deep muscles work and feel them again, or feel them for the first time.
Absolutely. And can we just say that it's never too late? And the whole
Yes.
concept of like the idea that, well, I'm going to go have more babies, so why start now? Oh my gosh. Can you talk about that? Because I could talk a whole hour about that, but I'm going to let you.
Yeah, and then also too, like some people say, well, before I come to see you, I need to do this, this, and this. Well, no, you need come see me now. Don't wait. I can give you tools that will help you during your pregnancy so that you will feel better, so that then you can start your recovery with your second from a better place, and you can have some tools put in place to help you in that really immediate postpartum period. But yeah, like there's no need to wait. There's so much that you can do, and the more that you can connect during pregnancy, the better off you're going to be in the postpartum period.
Oh, it makes such a difference. And I'm really seeing in women that are going through like my Necta Fitness membership, like the prenatal aspect of it, right? You can learn so much when you're pregnant, which can have such a positive effect on your delivery and also then the postpartum. And so the whole idea of, well, I'm just going to wait, because it's like, no, absolutely not. It doesn't matter. Like wherever you're at right now is the best time in your life to start learning some of this. Whether it's, if you're in New York and you can go to see Solange in person, that's amazing. And if not, like I've got my core rehab program online. There's the, prenatal membership. Solange was also an advisor for me for core rehab. So I love that, she's been through a lot of it and was definitely an amazing advisor in putting that together, because I wanted to make sure it jived with the PT world as well. And it takes you back to the basics, and this is what is so amazing. And it can be challenging to get this, especially if for women that really just want to work out super hard and want to get back to that high intensity training and running and whatever it might be. You really, really need to pull back the reins and reconnect, like Solange, you had mentioned, refinding things that you've never felt before. And then you build back up. And then next thing you know, months down the road, you're running again or doing high intensity training when your body's ready for it. It's a whole new world. You're like, oh my gosh, I never knew I could feel my core this way or my body this way. And it really makes what you're doing so much more effective. So it's pretty cool. And I know both of us see that time and time again.
Absolutely. And also being able to feel these muscles and understand how they fit into exercise and how they fit into what we're doing during the day-to-day, that's huge. And that's something that, I know going back to my history, that's something that I really didn't understand. And there was a lot of focus on engage, tight, hard body, and not the way the core is designed to work, which is through breathing. And then when we're doing exercises, depending on what we're doing, there's different levels of engagement. So sometimes the deep muscles need to work a little bit more, and sometimes they need to work a little bit less. And it really all depends on that exercise. And then same thing, if we're moving around during the day, we really don't need to be engaging at all if our body is moving well and we have a sense of it. But if we're going to pick something up, if we're going to be carrying something, different types of workouts that we're going to be doing, there's different levels of engagement. And I think going back to my history, it was all about the more it was engaged, the better, strong and tight. And what I ended up with was a lot of tension and not a balance in musculature and a balance in overall how the body worked, and having the ability to contract and relax. And, I think what's great is in your program, the first thing that you teach is really the lengthening aspect, and that when we breathe, you have to lengthen and then you contract. So you're starting from a very balanced place, as opposed to most people starting from that tight place.
Yes.
And the association that tight is something that would be healthy. I mean,
Okay.
tight is just tight.
So so I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to bring this up. My husband and I, this came up, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, watching football, and it's interesting, right? You see different athletes, and those that tend to be much more muscular and tight, and they're really lifting heavy, those are the ones that you tend to see maybe walk away with some more injuries. And then those that are doing more of, they may not look as fit, but they're doing more of the fluid motions, the fascial training. I want to dive into this with you because I know you've been doing your Franklin training, which I know is about fascia and breathing and, movement and all of that. But a big piece of that is, when we tap into our fascial system, not just the muscular system, I mean, it's all connected, right? But when we're not all about just like looking super ripped and all of that, like when we're actually listening and feeling what's going on in our body, our results are lifelong or just can escalate and improve so much. And if we think about our body in the long term and like, okay, well, what can we do now to better improve our core function, obviously, number one, but then how our body moves, because everything is connected. And you talked about like the tightness and the gripping. And that's actually when we're more likely to like injure ourselves than if we're more fluid and lengthened and things like that. So yeah, do you want to talk more about your fascial training? And I'd love for you to share some of your, your breath expertise, because obviously we both know how important breathing is. We have to breathe, people, so let's learn to do it correctly. And you know what? The one thing about breath is that, you can do it all the time. That's what I love about it. You can be driving, you can be walking, you can be just whatever, you can be laying down, and we're always breathing. So why not better our breathing?
So I'm going to take you back. We're both moms of 3. So this is a few years back. So my kids were very, very young. I think the time maybe my oldest was 5. So 5, 3, and 1. And there was a lot of stress and tension, pretty hectic. And I was always trying to find time to exercise. Should have been looking during the day, right? But I always, when could I get that, that 1 hour to get to the gym, to get to a class. And so I was always rushing back and forth, get into that class, get out. And I was just looking for that escape. And what happened was that, and whether it was the class that was like the straw that broke the camel's back or not, I ended up injuring my back, and like pretty severely. And none of my patients or anyone in my class would have known, because, I was very good at disguising it, but my body overall had too much tension. And so I basically had to stop everything that I was doing physically, except, working. And somehow I was able to get up and down off the floor and, able to teach and work with my patients and disguise it. Probably a magician somehow. But
the things that we can force our bodies to do, right?
But the whole thing, and this bringing me to my Franklin method training, is I was not noticing what I was doing. I was not noticing the signs, noticing the tension, noticing the sensations going on in my body. And I was seeking out that time to exercise. It's like, oh, this is my time to just zone out and do whatever that person was telling me to do. And that was actually the wrong thing, because that's your time to pay attention to you and make sure that the exercise is appropriate for what your body needs. And so beginning by noticing how your body is moving, noticing what you're doing, and then understanding the design and function of the body. So in the Franklin method, we look at how the body evolved. What is the design and function of the different parts? And then we look at how that's designed to move, and we feel that in our body. So we're embodying that design and function. So then we can take that in a mindful way and apply it to any discipline of exercise, any form of exercise. And if you know how the bones are supposed to bend when you're doing this, you can be following that, paying attention to those sensations. And by allowing the body to do what it's designed to do, you're working your muscles in a balanced fashion, as opposed to just pushing things hard and really stretching and squeezing and doing this and trying to make things happen that possibly shouldn't be happening or aren't right for your body. So I was working through this back injury, and I saw this Franklin Method workshop, Breathing for Life, and I was like, I've got to take this. So it really was a game changer for me to feel how I was not using my deep core system, and then to embody the diaphragm and how these deep muscles work. I felt so much relief in my body, so much mobility. And I knew then that teaching the Franklin Method was something that I wanted to do. So from there, I ended up working with a private instructor for about a year and a half until I was able to then sign up for the teacher training. And this was over a period of time. So at that point, my kids were a little bit older, more self-sufficient. So the timing was right for me. But the fact that it really allows you to notice and understand these movements in your body, feel breathing, feel how the muscles work together. I mean, it was really amazing. It was something that I really had not been taught in my training as a physical therapist, that really to pay attention to these sensations. And then one step further, there's so much imagery that's used in the Franklin Method that once you understand the design and function, then you're using imagery to have an overall better experience and to increase the quality of that movement. And that imagery really gets you out of the whole idea of squeezing this, squeezing that, and allowing for just a really fluid action of muscles, really nice movement, and a great experience for the body.
I love imagery. I think that's amazing. And I was just doing some reading the other day. I'm like such a geek when it comes to learning about the body and fascia. And it's one thing I've said the last handful of years is, that when you first start teaching and learning something, right? It's like initially you may not be able to feel like 90% of what I teach our clients. And it's just one of those things where, like, when you can visualize the cueing that we're saying, like the lengthening, like initially I'm like, just lengthen. If you forget everything else, just at least do that, because that's like a good visual you can visualize during your day. And there's actually research now that's kind of showing and confirming that those visualizations are actually going to help speed up that awareness and improving the fascial connections, the muscular connection, all of that. So it's pretty fascinating.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Definitely. And where the Franklin Method begins, it just begins with really, it's an introduction to your mind and a whole toolbox that exists in your mind that you can tap into. You can learn how to use different forms of imageries to have a better experience in your body. And these imageries are scientifically proven. And do you want someone telling you what you need, or do you, as the student and the participant, do you want to have access to that toolbox and to be able to expand on that so you can really own your experience? I'm really excited about in bridging Franklin Method into physical therapy, because as the PT, I am the healer. I do a lot of hands-on work. People are coming to me to, for lack of a better word, fix this. And what I'm doing is I'm teaching someone to have an awareness in their body and going first to their mind to be able to sense and have a better understanding of that part in the body. And then now feel how that moves versus me doing so much hands-on positioning and this is the right position, that is the right position. I'm letting them move and explore and notice, well, yeah, I've been in this position for a bit. I need a little bit more of that. oh, the body can move in that way. I didn't even know that. Isn't that interesting? And to kind of understand that, wow, this is really self-discovery. Somewhere along the lines, I stopped having all these movements that I was supposed to have. But you know what? Now that I understand that the student understands that, they can have that experience and they can recreate it. So many times they come to me and like, is this the right position that my pelvis should be in? Is it? Yes or no? I mean, is there one right position? Or show me the movement that your pelvis has, and let's find that nice range, that nice balance, and let's have it so that the student, the patient, can reproduce it on their own, and that they really, really get it. It takes the pressure off me, which is great.
Well, and the thing is, too, like with pelvic positioning, which is huge with core connection and getting the pelvic floor and deep core to fire, right? But because everybody's bodies are so different, some people may have a little bit more of a tuck. Well, we don't want too tucked. Some other people might have a little bit more of an anterior. And so when the body, like you're talking about, when you have to initially have to start to feel things, we can't ever force movements. And that's where the like super intense exercise or the gripping that can happen, like you were mentioning before, like the just kind of powering through. When we bring that awareness in, it's a game changer. But the transition into that is not always a smooth and easy one for people. Yeah. So just such a big awareness, I think, for so many to be aware of. And like, wow, there's this whole other realm with the body when you're open to feeling more in your body. So, okay, Solange, do you have a good visual that you can kind of just talk our listeners through, whether they're just standing or sitting, whether it's just a breath or, something that's pretty simple everybody can do throughout their day?
Yeah, so usually, I wouldn't say usually because I teach in many different ways, but whether you're sitting or lying down, finding your sit bones, so the bony part of your butt that you sit on, and so sitting well, and then place one hand on the chest, one hand on the lower belly, so all the way down. I find that sometimes when people place their hand on their belly, it's kind of up by the ribs, but if you take it and you kind of place it over your bikini area, take a breath in and just notice where you feel the breath going. So breathing in, just beginning to notice, so tuning in to the breath and seeing which hand is moving. Is it the top hand? Is it the bottom hand? And then beginning to think about breathing and how breathing comes from the diaphragm. So can we visualize when we breathe in, the diaphragm moving down, creating a give in the belly as the diaphragm moves down, and then there being a little give in the pelvic floor. And then as we exhale, there being a gentle rise and the belly gently flattening. So seeing if we can feel that rhythm that we breathe in, there's a give, and then exhale, there's a flattening. This give that we feel is not a pushing out or a letting go. It's actually an increase in tone. So we're not doing anything. It's a lengthening. We don't have to do anything. We just have to allow our muscles not to grip, and that will happen on its own. That gentle rise, that softening, lengthening of the pelvic floor, and then with the exhale, a gentle return to the starting position. So just beginning to notice, are both my hands moving? And then to check in with the rib cage. What do I feel in the rib cage now? Do I feel like I have a tendency to just grip around there from overactive muscles and maybe some stiffness due to postural habits? Can I feel this umbrella opening with the ribs as I breathe in? Feeling that give in the belly, that softening of the pelvic floor, and then with the exhale, a gentle rise, a flattening, and a return to starting position of the rib cage. And what I notice that people get hung up on is this exhale, that it really is forceful. And if you can think of the exhale as being soft, this forceful exhale, they're almost trying so hard to connect to these deep muscles and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And if we do that, we're going to bypass them and actually recruit everything external, and then create a downward pressure possibly, or a forward pressure outwards, and miss the whole action of the deep system. So I know you asked for a simple.
No, I get it.
Breath.
There is no such thing.
But so I guess the simple thing would be just to check in and notice, are things moving down 3-dimensionally downward? Am I allowing for movement, and what is my pattern? Some people notice, like I'm stuck up in my chest. Like I can breathe only so far, like I feel a little movement at the belly button, but I'm not sure about the sit bones and the pelvic floor. And for that, I would bring out my pelvis model. So just show people, well, perhaps they don't have the understanding of where these muscles are, where the landmarks of the pelvis are in their body. So if we don't know where that is, it can be challenging for us to focus on that when we're breathing. So sometimes by just showing the bones, having them find the landmarks, that really changes everything. And I really get people to think about less effort here.
Yes.
Less effort. And really just to notice that the power of breathing. Everyone wants sort of like, well, where is the exercise here? Well, that was the exercise.
So Solange, and I know you see this too, because I see this all the time, is it's a process. And so many people initially overactivate, especially through the core. And again, like you said, it can put a downward pressure, and you're putting the downward pressure on the pelvic floor is what's happening, or the belly is actually pushing outward. So potentially actually not really being complementary to improving pelvic floor, deep core, diastasis, things like that. And men can also have pelvic floor weakness and diastasis. I just like to put that out there. So I know it's predominantly women that are going to be listening to this, but it's not really talked about a lot, but it's like, no, it's an important piece for a male as well when it comes to the deep core. I work with men with diastasis. It's so funny, when you first start working with someone, and I see this with men especially, women too, but men, like I tell them, okay, we're doing some like simple pelvic tilts or something. I love those to teach people, and it's a process. I guarantee, like the first time you really do those and try to listen to and get into what's going on with your breath, everybody forces everything with the glutes and the hamstrings and the rectus abdominals and the obliques, and like they just want to move everything as one. And it's like, when you really start to feel the different layers. And a big piece of that, so a big takeaway for everyone listening is, when you're doing the exercise, especially the like simplistic ones where you don't have any weights or anything like that, really listening and getting into what's going on with your breath. Just like Solange, gave us that, like, do that, practice that. And here's what I love. And here, is like learning so many different methods from different people and modalities and cues, because we all pick up our things a different way, or maybe it takes, maybe that helps someone who just hasn't gotten it before, and so I love, that's why I'm doing this, is like, we want to talk about all this. But if the initial thing you can do is just bring a little bit more awareness into your core, and instantly, whatever exercise it is you're doing, and you take your breath back by like half and do it gentler, it actually goes deeper. It's like this backwards way of so many of us have been taught. I mean, I started out in exercise science, right? It was fitness all the way. And you learn about, programming for fitness. And I'm like, I don't do that anymore, because I do what's optimal for the body. I'm creating strength. And I know you do the same thing. And so it's just like this awareness that we can do so much more through movement and exercise and fitness. But I think that's a big piece of it is, we've got to pull it back and bring the awareness into our body, and not just be like, oh, I want to get my biceps stronger, or I want to get my abs stronger. And it's so integrated. We can't have an amazing, strong pelvic floor because we can have too strong of a pelvic floor, right? If our glutes and hamstrings aren't working properly, so, and the breath, I cannot tell you, I wish I learned breath so much better years and years ago. And it's funny because like I went through Pilates training. I've had so much training over the years, and it's like the breath is just such an overlooked piece. Like you'll be taught like, oh, you should breathe this way. But no one takes you through what it should really, like the awareness. Like you just talked about, which I love because it's not simple. The breath is
Yeah.
so complex but so effective.
And just even beginning on just such a simple level, just to feel, and then knowing that you can always feel more and more and more. And that's kind of what's really, really exciting about it. Once
Oh
you
yes.
tune in and you start paying attention to these sensations, you end up being able to feel so much more in your body. And so this practice just of like you go deeper and deeper, and it's like, wow, I can feel the ribs, I can feel different areas, I can feel different parts of the pelvic floor. It just becomes so exciting because I think sometimes people look like, well, where is the exercise that's real, or where is that the best new exercise? I want something really, really that's going to excite me. And what's exciting is that you feel more, you connect more, and you also can connect more with not only the breathing, but what's above and below, and see how that's influencing the breathing as well. So it's all connected, and you just go
All
deeper
connected.
and deeper.
And here's the thing is you have to start somewhere. You really do.
Yeah.
And it's, sometimes when you start to really bring more awareness to the body, it's so foreign. You're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what you're talking about. But you know what? That's okay. You have to start somewhere. We all have to start somewhere. And I know, Solange, for you, and I know for me, like where we're at now today, because you and I like geek out with all this, we're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to learn more and
Mm-hmm.
see how my body feels in another year, in another 5 years and 10 years of all of this practice, and constantly trying to learn more and experiment with new movements and new body work, whatever it is. So it's pretty exciting. It's
Yeah.
pretty darn amazing what the body is
And
capable of.
absolutely. And I keep thinking, in terms of my journey, which in different parts where I was always like seeking out to find that hour of time, that class that I was going to, like I wish I would have had a program like yours to just, first of all,
Oh,
take the
thank
pressure
you.
off. It's like, you know what? It's like the tools are right here for you. Because just finding that time when to be away from your baby, and at that point I had three
Mm-hmm.
three toddlers, that was really, really stressful. So it's like you want something that's going to create the optimal environment for your body to heal. So having the tools right there, and having, it's like you have 10 minutes. Well, I can just do that one tutorial there, and that's 10 minutes there. And, you have a little bit more time. You can put these parts together, and you have your today you have a 45-minute gap. You know what? You can do a longer one. And that it's taught in it's such a holistic in a way that these are good tools for your body versus, I was running off, taking whatever class and just like zoning out, and kind of when I should have been listening to the cues and listening to what was being said, and having, and just knowing that was good information for my body. That was just, for me, it was just random information in a class. This is the actual tools that will help you to heal postpartum. And there's no pressure involved, because you can do it right from the comfort of your own home. So I'm going back, like that, that I needed that.
Well, now it's there. So, Solange, thank you. I appreciate the little plug for my core rehab. Thank you. But the one, and something else I want to talk with you, because you mentioned about your back, when you hurt your back, and I look back at my upbringing, and it's like I had so much knee pain growing up, and since having kids, I've had some hip junk, which was kind of brought about by having the expansion and bringing back of the pelvis, and so it really pushed me into like learning even more. And so it's one just huge thing, I think, is that we need to embrace, even though these things happen and we're like, they kind of really suck,
Yeah.
but it makes you stop and be like, well, what can I do about it? So instead of being like, and for moms that have diastasis, back pain, neck pain, like pelvic floor issues, like whatever it is, like embrace that and be like, you know what, this is happening. It's going, to make you stop and be like, I need to reevaluate how my body is functioning and how my body is moving. And it's never too late and it's never too soon. And prevention, so anyone that's listening like doesn't have any of this stuff, great. That's like best if you can start. But it's just because those things happen and they seem to be normal, right? But I hate that word because it's like, what's normal? For one, everybody's bodies are different. But the whole fact that like we as a society kind of like, oh, well, that's just normal with having babies and motherhood. And just, it's like, it really doesn't need to be, because so many women that Solange helps in person. So one of these days we're going to get her to have a little online thing. So we'll talk about that off recording. But at some point we'll do another talking about that, because obviously you have so much amazingness to share with the world. But so many women are seeing and feeling number one, because that's the most important, the change. And if you can get rid of pains and start your core functioning better and start moving and feeling better, like that right there is such a quality of life improvement. And so I just want to, demyth the whole, like, things have to come with, motherhood. Sometimes we have to go through them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's purposeful, right? Solange, would you have maybe not stumbled on the Franklin method quite as simple if you hadn't hurt your back?
Yeah, definitely. And look, in each of the births and recoveries of my three children, I mean, it was never an easy recovery. Like there was pain and there were issues there. And I think what's been so great with my approach to healing and physical therapy is just, when you are noticing your body and how it's moving, yeah, you can go and check in with a doctor, like what's going on here. But at the end of the day, you have to start feeling these things yourself so that you can see, like, what is really causing this pain? Why am I feeling these weird sensations? So working with a pelvic floor physical therapist who can sort of guide you in that, so you can put all the pieces together, but knowing that, like, look, you're gonna have to do some active work here to feel and discover what's going on and to explore. And that really has been, that kind of has taken my healing to the next level and just my movement. And I'm grateful for that, because, given how much pain I was in at certain points, I wouldn't have thought that my body could feel this good now. I would have thought like, oh, you know what? I've got three little kids. How am I going to spend the time to heal myself, this and that? But once you start to notice and feel and really understand how the body moves, it's like the body wants to heal. And once you start giving the body the healthy, functional movements, the way it's designed to move, it's really, really exciting that the body is so resilient. And that, wow, like sometimes these injuries postpartum sound really, really bad. And they're like, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. That's really, really bad. But these are very, very common. And once you start to work on healthy movements for your body, these things can resolve. And we see that a lot of it was caused by how we are either moving or not moving and getting into these holding patterns, postural patterns caused by stress and tension and just an overall lack of self-care for us. So it's just really exciting that in working on smaller movements, paying attention, we can really, really have such a huge capacity to heal and actually feel better.
Absolutely. So, and it doesn't have to take an hour a day. Like you talked about how hard it is to get away. And that's where you and I are on the same page. It's like just finding these little bits of times, and you can do something at home and taking care and listening to your body, because we have such the capability to really improve how our body feels. And I know it's hard. We both have 3 kids that are like all about the same ages apart. And how old's your oldest now?
So my oldest is 9, okay, and so my middle 7.
Okay,
5.
So you're a little bit younger. My oldest is 10, almost 11, and it's crazy. Like you look back to when you have 3 back to back, almost like you're pregnant, nursing, you get a tiny little break, and then it like starts all over again. And you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, it was so just depleted, even though I was working out. And I wish, like, that's why I'm like, I get so passionate about teaching all of this, as I know you do too, because you're like, look, if I would have been able to do even just a little bit of what I know, understand and know now, when during the childbirth years of us having children,
Yeah.
how much better we would have both felt.
Yeah. No, I look at that and I was like, wow, like I was, like I look at pictures of myself a few years back and I'm like, wow, like I was really, really struggling then. Those kids were really, really depleting me. But then the power of it too, and this is why it's never too late, is once you find the time and you're ready and you start using the tools, the body is so resilient that it really can at any point along the timeline begin to heal and begin to feel better. But I wish that, I wish I had an appointment with myself back then saying, listen, like you're walking, or you're doing a lot of walking between preschool and here and there, like focus on walking and breathing with walking. Like you're breastfeeding a lot, like you're breathing, like I was breastfeeding for 6 years, like let's look at, movements of the pelvis when you're breastfeeding, breathing when you're breastfeeding, like coming out of making what could be a static position an actually very dynamic position, and you're bonding with your baby. Wow. Wouldn't that be great? And really looking at like, there's so much up and down from, whether you're on the couch to standing. Right?
So actually learning how to do that and connect with your body and your breath, you're going to be moving a lot more during your day than you realize sometimes. And how much when you, again, you don't always go do formal exercise. I find that in the day-to-day is really where we're making the biggest difference with our core, with how our body feels. Exercise is great, but we've got to get the day-to-day stuff down. We've got to understand how to connect better with our breathing. But again, it's a process. You've got to just start. And it's amazing if you just start, like, then, 3 months down the road, 6 months, like it's going to be, you'll be blown away at the improvement in how you feel, like little tiny things along the way. Okay, so Solange, do you have any other little quick takeaways to share with our audience of things that, they can do to help improve, their quality of life and how they feel?
Yeah, so I would just say, because everyone's like, oh, I need to find the time for self-care. Like that's it. I need to find that time. Well, the time is right here, right now. We don't have to carve out that time. We can be anywhere and notice, how are we sitting? How are we standing? Just checking in with our body. Like when we're getting up and down from a chair, like how is that movement? And that just to notice, are we breathing? That the self-care is here. That if we keep saying, well, I'm going to carve out the time, that may or may not happen. But that these little moments of checking in just a little bit, and it can be 1 minute, it can be 30 seconds. And also looking at like the idea of posture. Everyone will say like, oh, I know my posture is terrible. I need to be in better posture. That's not just taking my body from, let's say, a slump position and straightening up. It's actually, let's move a little bit and see if we can organically find a better position for the body. So we can't go from one extreme and then say, well, now I'm straight. That's better. We have to find a nice range and be able to move within this range, because what is posture? Posture is readiness for movement. If we're in that stiff position and we're holding that, go ahead, try to take a step. You can't. So really feeling like, oh, like catch yourself. Can I move my rib cage back and forth? Can I move my pelvis? Do I tend to kind of be stuck and rigid? And really just looking at expanding upon that these little things, like that is your self-care. And look, great. I love to exercise too. If you can get your 45 minutes, your hour, fantastic. But just knowing that there's so much power in the self-care in the day-to-day. And those moments, if you missed it because you weren't paying attention, guess what? There's another one coming along.
Absolutely.
So,
Always. So you just gotta
you didn't breathe
start.
well there.
You just gotta
You
start.
just gotta start. Start by noticing. Give your body the gift of that by noticing and saying, I'm ready to pay attention now, and I'm ready to listen to you.
I love
I'm ready to
that.
listen to you, and not what someone else is going to say about you, but what you are going to say, what you are going to hear by listening.
Well, thank you, Solange. Okay, so Solange, will you share with our listeners where they can find more about you? And I will also obviously post everything on coreconnectionspodcast.com as well to make it easy. But where can they
Yeah,
find?
so they can find. So I'm based in New York City. I'm in Tribeca. My website is www.completecorenyc.com. I'm on Instagram at completecorenyc and also Facebook. I mainly do a lot of posting on Instagram though. And yeah, I do pelvic floor physical therapy, so home visits for pregnancy and postpartum, though issues do not only surround the pregnancy and postpartum period. And then I also teach Franklin Method classes and workshops, and I'm in the middle of my pelvic power series. So if you are inspired after hearing this and want to join the workshop, there is still time. It's not too late. So you can see that on my website.
Okay, perfect. So, well, she'll have it all up there. And then someday when she has her online trainings, we'll do another podcast and talk more about
Yeah.
that because I know you have such amazing insight and so much to share. So, Solange, thank you so much for joining us today. I super appreciate you taking the time to share with us. We talked for a long time. It was awesome. You and I can talk for like
Yeah.
hours and hours. Like we barely scratched the surface.
I know. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Before I sign off, I want to leave you with my tip of the day. Attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. Thank you, Winston Churchill. So, for more information about today's podcast, to sign up for my free Core Fundamentals course and check out Core Rehab Program, which opens a couple times a year, and everything else of mine, and there's always new things coming about, you can check it out at coreconnectionspodcast.com or go directly to ericazeal.com. If you liked today's episode, I would love for you to leave a review, share it with a friend, someone that you know would enjoy it as well. The more that we share, the more people we can reach and help improve their quality of life. So thank you so much for joining, and I will see you guys next time.